Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another exciting edition of Free Advice Friday. I know this is going to be a really popular one because I know that a lot of people have a lot of questions about e-learning, and I've brought somebody in who is a master of e-learning who is going to be able to easily and successfully answer all of those questions to help us find all the riches and fame and glory that there is to find. Is there actually glory in the e-learning market, Christy?
I don't know if there's glory, but there's definitely,
There's some
good repeat
riches.
business. Yeah, there's some riches.
There's some riches. That's it's the story that I tell all the time because I go to cross the border and the border guards, and when you're crossing the border, they always ask you, what do you do? And I say, I'm a voice actor. And their very first question is, what have I heard you on? And I'm like, unless you listen to the internal employee training for such and such I'm like, you've never heard me on anything. And then there's like this big disappointment. Like, oh,
Yeah.
so you're really not actually a big deal. I'm like, no, but I make good money doing e-learning.
Yeah,
So there's that, it offsets.
it does. It does. I'm living a good life.
Yes. So, Christy, I'm excited to have you here, and thank you
Yeah.
for coming to Free Advice Friday. So, for those of you that are joining into the live stream, Christy is somebody who does a ton of work in the e-learning space. I was actually commenting to her just before we went live. She has the second most popular episode of the Everyday VOpreneur podcast ever, the second most downloaded episode, which was talking about e-learning. And so that's how I know that she's got good information to share, and people will definitely have some questions. So, for those of you who are in the space but looking to improve, or if you are thinking that maybe the e-learning space is a space that you are interested in going into, this is going to be a really good opportunity for you to basically get a masterclass coaching session from somebody who's kicking butt in that genre. So if you do have a question that you would like to ask, of course, feel free to type it into the comments. Just put a Q beside it so that it pops up a little bit easier for me to find in the chat. And looking forward to your questions. Welcome, Jim, Kat, Monique, Sean, Shannon. Thanks for hanging out. Christy, I always
Yeah.
give you credit for one of the greatest e-learning tips that I ever picked up on. And I don't know how I never thought about this before. You were talking about, because very often we price e-learning by the word,
Hmm.
which I love pricing e-learning by the word because it removes any and all guesswork as to,
Right.
how many minutes this is going to be or how many hours this is going to be. I'm like, just send me your script, give me a word count, we're good to go. But
Right.
you were talking about when you get into things like acronyms or telephone numbers, which will appear as one word if you're in a word count, but a 1-800 number, what is that? That's like 10 digits, 11 digits or something
10.
like that. So
Yeah.
that's actually 10 words. And so at
It
25
is.
cents a word, when you start breaking those things out, that actually adds up to a pretty decent chunk of change when you get into it. And I was always like, I still remember when you told me that tip, and I was like, how did I never think of that before? So now I take the time to go through every script and make all of those things words. And I do, the one training series that I do for firefighter e-learning, like everything is acronyms, right? And so
Right.
that makes a big difference when you're saying NFPA 1071, which would appear as one word when you highlight it, but then you go NFPA 1071. I'm like, at 25 cents a pop, I'm
I
leaving
know,
big money
making
on
more
the
money.
table. So that
Yeah,
was such a good tip. Such a good
well,
tip.
good. Yeah, it's funny because that's one thing that I always tell everybody, dates and numbers and things are your friend. When
Yep.
you look at all that, you're like, "Oh, yay, more numbers, please, more numbers," because they end up adding up. I
Yep.
did a huge it was a 6-month-long project for AAA and, AAA.
Yep.
So, I ended up
That adds
making
up a
extra
few times over 6
I ended
months.
up making, 500 extra dollars, and I'm like as I tell everybody, "I want my money." I
Yeah.
mean, I said it, "I want my money,"
Yep.
so an extra $500 on the top of a project just to say every time I said AAA, it
Yep.
was like, "Okay, that's real money. That's not, just an extra $4.22 or whatever." No, 500 bucks is 500 bucks, and I'll take it all day long. So, yeah,
And then add
check
that
your
up
word count.
over every module over the span of a career, and right, that's an extra
Yeah.
couple years of retirement is what that is. So,
Yeah, it does work. It does help. Yes,
yep.
absolutely. So, if I'm getting paid by the word, and if I say a word, I want to be paid for it. So,
Yep.
The word count
Absolutely.
versus the actual is not always the same,
Right on.
but then sometimes, if there are titles and things in there or, what you're supposed to label things and, you have to subtract that out.
Subtract that out.
So,
Yep.
I kind of give them a rough estimate based on, Word will say it has so many words in it, and I'm like, "Well, based on this, it's rough and a rough estimate. It may be a little more or a little less." And so sometimes I, just delete all that stuff out and try to get a real word count and then go through it. But there is something that, I think one of a voice actor created, and you can insert your script into it, and it will literally break it out for you. It will take all those words and put them
Ooh.
into word count, and I have it saved somewhere in my it's somewhere. I'll find it.
Right
I
on.
know
That
it's on
sounds
my
like a
website.
handy little tool.
It is. Let me see if I can find the name of it. Script timer. No, not script timer. That's not it. I'll have to figure it out. But yeah, I'll see if I can find it and I can share it. But
Okay. Sounds good.
real count. It's called real count.
Real count. Okay.
Yes,
That's
real
a
count.
there's a
Yeah.
pro tip. Real count.
Yep, real count. And it's not always perfect, but it does tell you the differences where it breaks things out. And mostly
Yep.
it's numbers and acronyms and dashes. So if you had
Things like that. Yeah.
head of class, and it has the
WWW.
yeah, those kinds of things. So it does
Yep.
break that out for you. So I think it was
Right
created
on.
by a voice actor, if I'm not mistaken. And so,
That's cool.
it helps. It helps a lot.
I will be looking that one up. That's going to be a handy one
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
again, welcome everybody to Free Advice Friday. If you have a question that you would like to ask Christi regarding e-learning, we are open to any and all questions on the subject. So feel free to type your question into the comments, and when I see it pop up on my screen, I'm happy to put that forward to Christi. Now, I just
Yeah.
mentioned that I like to price by the word because I feel like
Mhm.
it just removes the guesswork, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if you've probably found yourself in this situation where the client comes to you and is like, I've got a 12-minute course that I need you to narrate. And you're like, okay, well, here's the price for a 12-minute course. And then you get the script and it's actually like an 18-minute course because they don't know how to count, or they tell you it's a 12-minute course and then you narrate it and you quote it and then it actually ends up being like a 7-minute course. Same deal. And so, but with word count, it's you can't really screw that up, but
True.
you can quote word, you can quote per finished minute, you can
Mhm.
quote per finished hour. Talk about those three, and is there a use case for one being better than another, or an instance where one is better than another, or what do you prefer?
I prefer in a way finished minute is what I've been doing most of because I have several clients who work off of that model.
Right?
And a lot of times I kind of go with whatever the client has originally given me. If they say to me, it's around 30 minutes, I'm like, okay, they're thinking minutes. All right. And then, so I will, if they give me the script on the front end, I look at it and I kind of do one thing, two things. It's like, okay, per finished minute, I do the calculation. Like, okay, that's going to get me this amount of money. But if I do it per word, how much is that going to get me? And whatever one is bigger is that's the one I go with.
That's what I'm going to quote.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to quote. And, because a lot of times I can come back to the client and say, hey, look, based on the word count of your project, it's actually more or less minutes than you thought. And I really like to work off of, per word.
Yep.
However, when it comes to revisions, the thing about, I, but then again, per finished minute is a little easier for revisions, in my opinion, sometimes. It just depends on what your client likes to work with. And,
Yep.
if they've ever had a precedent in the past, hey, the last time we worked with a voice actor, they did this, then you're kind of whatever. I think the per word thing gets me when it comes to revisions, especially if I know a client is very kind of nitpicky and just sends like a sentence or two. It's like, oh gosh, okay, I'm not going to bill them for
Yeah.
$3.45, whatever it is. So I tell them very clearly if I'm going to quote per word, I tell them very clearly when it comes to revisions, I don't like to bill you and, and I actually say this, I don't like to bill you and put your accounting system, your accounting department through the pain of writing me a check for $6.22. I'll come up with some, funky number. So they're like,
Yep.
oh yeah, I didn't think about that, you know, so instead, I have a project minimum when it comes to revisions. If it's a
Yeah.
half a
That's
page
the
or
way I do
more,
it.
it's just a flat rate. So it's in your best interest to send me as many revisions at one time as possible. And then they feel very happy to have that up front. They're like, oh yeah. So then it kind of gets them to get all their ducks in a row and talk to all their subject matter experts and say, yeah, hey, okay, everyone feedback at one time because we're only going to do one set of revisions because it's, $100 or whatever it's
Well,
going to
and that's
be.
the big thing, right? Is when they
Yeah.
know that there's money on the line, then it definitely incentivizes them to one extra
Mhm.
once over through the script or whatever to make sure. I've
Yeah.
got a couple of clients that are kind of a per page for revisions, kind of a per page
Yeah.
rate, but then I also do I do a 30-minute session fee is basically what I've called it for
Yeah.
revisions for clients
Me
because
too.
I'm in the same position where I don't want to do a, $3 invoice for a one line or
Yeah.
something like that. So it's just
Right.
a minimum 30-minute session build out. And so if they send me one line or, 12 lines, it doesn't matter if I
Ex
get it done in
That's
30
how I am.
minutes, it's a 30-minute session and it makes it easy to go that way. So I'm curious
Yeah.
when you're calculating out for per finished hour or per finished minute, what do you use as your benchmark for this many words equals an hour?
The typical 150, which I know is
150
kind of
words per minute.
150 words per minute. Yeah,
Yeah.
I tend to speak a little fast, but sometimes if I know I need to speak a little slower, I will literally take a Post-it note with a whole bunch. I'll put big dollar signs on it. Slow. I'll put slow equals dollar signs, and I put it on my screen above where my script is because it's like this one they wanted it to be. Because sometimes depending on the subject I'm doing. I have clients who are like, please, make sure because the audience for this is worldwide and most of the audience is not going to be English as their first language. They do
Yep.
speak English, but it's a
Yep.
global company. So we want to make sure that everybody is understanding. So take your time with this one. And so if they ever say that, I'm like, okay, slow equals more money because because that particular client likes to do per
Or
finished
per
minute.
finished minute.
I'm
Yep.
like, okay, that means more money if I slow down.
It is so hard for me sometimes. I've got a
I
couple of
know.
clients that are because
Me
I tend to
too.
be a fast talker too, and
Me too.
I'm like standing in the studio. I'm like, "Woo, sigh, breathe." Like
Yes.
because then when I start reading, it feels
Yeah.
painfully slow to me.
Yeah.
But I'm sure when they listen back to it, they probably still think I'm talking too fast. And so that is definitely
Yeah.
one of the challenges is trying to find that pacing depending on what you're delivering. All right, we got
Yeah.
some questions popping in
Well,
here.
good.
So this
Good.
one comes from Richard. How common is a rate per hour of studio time? And how do you do with that? So generally with e-learning, I think we're
Mhm.
billing more per finished hour of audio or per
Yeah.
finished minute of audio or per word of audio.
Or
Do you
word.
bill
Yeah.
a studio time? Like,
Only if somebody is going to do all the editing. Only if it's just me recording and sending them the absolute raw file, me not even getting rid of any of my mistakes. If they're doing all the finished work on the end and I don't have to, do any of the editing of, file separation and taking, diminishing the breaths, never taking them out, diminishing your breaths, that kind of thing. All that, if I don't have to do any editing whatsoever, but just hit record and hit stop and send the file, then I could do, studio time. But other than that, no. I mean, if they're asking me to do all the editing and the proofing and everything else and the file labeling and that I don't charge that way because it's really not based on how much time it takes us as much as it is the finished product that
finished
they're
product,
getting.
yeah. I'm
Yeah.
curious though, that brings up another point when it comes to your record time, because this is
Mhm.
another challenge for voice actors trying to figure out some of this stuff. Do you
Yeah.
have a ratio that you look at? Like, are you like a 1-to-3 ratio, a 1-to-4 ratio? Like one finished hour of e-learning is 3 hours of record and edit time or 4 hours of
Yeah.
record or edit time. What do you base off of?
If it's an easier subject or something I'm a little more familiar with because I've done it 100 times, like, sexual harassment or what, PPE and all that kind of yay
Yep.
fun stuff. Those things I'm typically about maybe 1 to 2.5 sometimes, just because I
Okay.
have a system down, but mostly 1 to 3,
One to
you know?
three.
Yeah,
Yeah.
1 to 3 is typical. I know when people are first starting out, they're about 1 to 5,
Yep.
because they're taking they have to figure out their editing system and how to
Yeah.
do their markers and how to label things and how to split files out and how to diminish their breaths and clean it up and all that stuff, and, once you get a system going and you know how to do it and you're able to, get your flow, that time will start to
Yep.
come down. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I've
I
kinda
I think I'm
gotten
probably about I generally figure about a 1 to 3 unless it's
yeah,
something really big, and then I
yeah,
might say 1 to 4 just to give myself a little bit of I'm kind of when I'm estimating the delivery time, right?
yes,
That's what we're talking about here to be clear. If a
mhm,
client comes to you with a finished hour of what's going to be a finished hour of e-learning, we're saying it's going to be 3 hours to record and edit it or 4 hours to record
mhm,
and edit it. So that helps me to build in an estimated delivery time. So if somebody comes to me
Right.
with something that's a lot bigger, I might just calculate a 1 to 4, but that's a,
Yeah.
what do they call it? Under promise and over deliver or whatever, right? Like I tell
Yeah.
them it's going to take me 3 days and then I deliver it in, 2, and then I look like the hero or whatever. So
Exactly,
yeah.
that's what I do too.
Yep.
And, I think part of it, is just figuring out how you work and
Mhm.
what's best for you, and you will get faster as you go along, and that's just, and I find that not as much e-learning is very long anymore.
No.
They may give you a whole bunch of scripts at one time, but it tends to be in general, smaller bites.
Yep.
That's what they're moving to, and so,
Thank you,
I never
TikTok and Instagram, for destroying our attention spans.
exactly. And I think it's also depends on the types of, learning they're trying to give their employees. Sometimes it's just they need just small bites of little tiny things that they're trying to work on, and, I think it's instead of sitting down and having the big training, it's like, "We're gonna do a little training here
Yep.
and a little training there," and so I think it's I try to be very careful about giving rates until I've seen the scripts because and I tell them, I said, "I know you may not have all your scripts ready, but if you could send me what you've got, it's gonna, give me a better sense of your project and therefore a more accurate bid." Because sometimes they're like, "Oh, yeah, we've got 14 modules," but they're all like 2 minutes each, and you're thinking, "Woohoo, 14 modules," and then it's like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, that didn't take that long." You know?
Which brings up
You're like,
another valid point, though. When you're pricing this stuff, I'm
yeah.
assuming you have a minimum,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
right?
No
Because if
project
you
yeah,
say that you're quoting per word and then they send you a 375 word script, you just totally screwed yourself. So
exactly.
having
So,
a
yeah.
studio minimum or a minimum session
Mhm.
fee or whatever, right? Then that
Yeah,
protects you when those smaller scripts come in. But I've noticed, I think
absolutely.
the vast majority of the stuff that I'm seeing now, I would say is in the 1,500 to 2,500 word range,
Yeah.
kind of in there. Now,
Yeah,
it
me
might
too.
all be part of a larger module that, or a larger project that might go on for 6 months, but I'm getting
Mhm.
those, scripts each
Drips and
time around.
drabs, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
like they do part 1 and it's like, "Well, we've got 3 scripts for part 1," and, it
Yep.
totals like, 2,700 words or something, and you're like, "Okay, great," module 1, module 2, module 3, whatever, and then, yeah, it just kinda keeps coming in little waves, that's I've got several clients that do that all the time, and,
Just
sometimes they don't
invoice
even
them
tell
out
me.
as you deliver them. Don't wait
Yes.
until the project's actually done because you
No,
might be
you do it.
waiting 8 months to get paid. So,
Exactly,
yeah.
and sometimes they're like, "Okay, we're done with this. Can you please invoice us?" "Why, yes, yes, I can."
Yes. All right,
Not a
here's another
problem.
question. This one comes from Kat. How do you catch a potential client's attention in a cold email so they'll listen to your demo or engage in the conversation? Is it mentioning an article, a webinar that they've provided? What is the trick to
Oh, Lord.
getting on the radar?
You
Please.
know I know. Yeah, I know.
Please, will you listen to my demo?
I think keeping believe it or not, keeping your email short and simple,
Yep.
and, I think if you're going to do a cold email, maybe you found them on LinkedIn or whatever, because that's such a big, place for people to go to find people on
Yep.
LinkedIn, because that's where, it's business to business. The thing about e-learning versus a lot of the other areas of voiceover, it's very business to business versus, creative minds. And I think a lot of the people that are in e-learning, they do have a creative bent to their, especially instructional designers who have to
Mhm.
create all this beautiful, images and, learning that people are gonna be engaging with. So they have a little bit of creativity to them, but they are still very much, on the side of business oriented. So to find something that hits all of that, you have to act and kind of present yourself business-like, but
Yep.
with a little bit of a creativity funness to yourself. Don't take yourself too seriously, but let them know you can solve their problem, which I know it's all the same stuff, but I think it's finding a creative way to let them know that, "Hey, I get your pain. I've been there." And, from maybe previous or past clients or,
Yep.
whatever it is, maybe you're thinking of me as too Hollywood for you. My demo may sound too Hollywood and even using that word, too Hollywood for you. But in fact, I like helping businesses.
Yep.
I'm a business person who can work with you and your business and all your clients, and make you look good to your clients so you look like the rock star and the Hollywood, star, and let me just kinda help be in the background for you. And I think sometimes it's like if you can make them feel like they're going to be the person that's gonna stand out within their company, especially if they're an independent instructional designer who's
Yeah.
been hired by the company,
Yep.
but they wanna keep their
They
job,
want to, yeah, they want to stay too, right?
which means, they keep hiring you
If
because 'cause you're
we do
making
good
them look
together,
good.
we win together. Yeah.
Exactly, and, if they get another independent client, or they change, areas, or whatever, they go to another place, you want them to take you with them.
Yep.
So I think it's more about making them look like a rock star,
Yeah.
and maybe using some of those words and stuff, just, to kinda liven it up and not be total business, but yet presenting yourself as kind of a fun, creative business that also understands that you are dealing with, corporate muckety mucks.
Yep.
You can live in both worlds, kinda like they are, I think is a very good approach when you're reaching out. And like you said, I think Kat had a good point there about, maybe mentioning an article, or if you see something on LinkedIn, if they've posted something that resonates with you, not just,
Yep.
"I'm gonna reference that because it'll make me sound good," but if it truly does, speak to you in some way, tell them that. Say, I saw on LinkedIn where you had posted blah, blah, blah. And I really enjoyed that because it reminds me of a project I worked on once. And I immediately, it immediately resonated with me, or something of that nature.
Well,
I
it
mean, you don't
also
want to
makes,
make it sound insincere, because you do have to be authentic, because everybody's looking for authenticity.
yes.
Everybody,
But it
so
also makes the email come across so that it's not just another generic form letter from another voice actor,
exactly.
and I think that's a big part of it. I know one thing
Yeah.
that's worked for me in the e-learning space too is let me help you beat your deadline. I don't know what it
Yeah.
is, but it feels like lately,
Yes.
I mean, everything needs to be handed in yesterday. I don't know if
I
you've noticed
know.
that at all, but
Yeah.
I've got some clients that I've been working with for years that it used to be like, "Hey, if you can give me this in 3 or 4 days," and now it's like, "Hey, can you give me this yesterday?" And it just seems to be a very common thing. I don't know if
It
team
is.
sizes have
Yeah.
shrunk or urgency has expanded or what, but if you have the ability to get stuff done and returned quickly,
Yeah.
that seems to be a pretty big thing right now, and so that might be
I
something
think
that
it
you wanna
is.
mention in an email too.
I think so, and, that's one of their problems. Again, if you're attacking their problems, which
Yep,
are, no budgets, not that we're not gonna get paid, but, no budgets and no
yep,
time.
yep,
It's the 2 things, money and time are the 2 things that nobody has enough of, and I
absolutely.
think acknowledging that in a fun way, and just saying, "Look, I am, here to help you get your stuff done and look like a rock star," and that means, giving you fast turnaround and, great quality, so you're not having to come back to me over and over again, so your project gets done, and you don't have to pay for a lot of revisions and that kind of thing. That really hits home with them,
Yep,
and that makes them kinda go, "Hmm, yeah, this is what we need to be doing.
that's
We
what
need
we
to
need.
hire
Yep,
her,"
yep.
So, I hope that helps, Kat.
I'm very curious to hear your answer to this question. This could be like
Okay.
solving the world peace problem or something.
Oh, good God.
Kelsey, how do you personally reduce mouth clicks and throat noises? Because this can be a challenge on e-learning, right? I feel like I drink a gallon of water a day, but my throat muscles can't help but to want to get a word in. Is it the old Granny Smith apple trick? What is your
That's a good
secret?
one.
It's
That's a good one.
isotope, the declicker in
The declicker,
RX10.
yes,
That's the
yes.
secret right there.
That's definitely one. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely rely on that. Lately I've been having a lot of more clicking than I thought, and it's weird because I actually had surgery on my mouth in December because I had extra bone growing in my mouth, and it was very painful and everything else, and was starting to kind of restrict my speech a little bit. But since it's been removed, I've noticed more mouth clicks. I'm like, "Well, darn it."
Yeah,
That's
that
kind of
sucks.
frustrating. I thought that would
Yeah.
solve that problem. So, yeah, I've been noticing it a lot more too, and you're right. I drink a ton of water. I mean, I've got this huge cup sitting next to me right now, and I drink it all the time. But I think, Granny Smith apples, but also another thing for the throat muscles and stuff is definitely stopping, doing some exercises, and making sure you warm up, and, warm up throughout the day. It's not just, I warm
Yep.
up in the morning. It's, at lunch, you warm up again. Constantly, I constantly sit at my desk and do lip trills and things. And I constantly, will
Yep.
do little, one of the things that I learned is to kind of to reset yourself to your head voice and everything else is the, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when you're, so when you're having a conversation with somebody, you can do it and they won't even notice. You can just, mm-hmm. And, where you're feeling it up here in your head
Yep.
voice, and that helps with your that helps hopefully release some of that tension you've got in your neck. And just, giving yourself a chance to, do some physical exercise or just take a moment and breathe. And that helps me. I've noticed that helps me a lot because sometimes I will get very stressed about, am I gonna be very mouth clicky today? And so it is something that I also struggle with, so I feel your pain.
I
But yeah,
know.
I think a lot of and, sometimes it has to do with my toothpaste. I changed toothpaste once,
Ooh,
and I was like, "Oh my god, what am I am sounding terrible." It's like, "I
that's
think
one
I
I
need
would
to."
not have thought of.
Yeah, I think I need to switch toothpaste back to what I was using because it's sounding very yucky. I don't know
You
what
better
it
tell us
is.
the brand. Maybe you're gonna get a sponsorship endorsement deal out of it or something. What toothpaste do we need to use as voice actors to not be so clicky?
Well, I mean, it was more of I went back to what I had been using before, and which is I think Colgate. Heck, I don't even know what I'm using. Colgate, I guess, is what I'm using.
There
Some
you
brand of
go.
Colgate.
There's the
But
solution to the mouth clicking.
yeah, it
One of the
helps with
things
me
that I
less.
learned recently, which was surprising to me, drinking water is really important, but
Yeah.
it's like this particular individual said that you actually have to drink like, one of these like 40 minutes before you go and record. It's not just drinking while you're in there, but actually
No.
drinking to properly hydrate before you even start, which
Yeah, it's
I
days worth
never,
before.
yeah, like I
Yeah, it's
never did that.
days. I
Yeah.
really start, on Sunday, I start drinking a lot more water and paying attention to it because sometimes on weekends when if I'm not here in the booth and I'm not working, I don't think about it as much. I mean,
Yep.
I will keep drinking and stuff, but I don't drink as much.
Yep.
But Sunday I start thinking about it because that's going to affect me on Monday.
Yep.
So if I don't drink enough on Sunday, then Monday I'm like, "Wow, I am super clicky today." And so it's keeping that hydrated. And I also use one of the things I really like to use and it helps me a lot is a this vocal mist nebulizer. It is fantastic. It's just this little tiny, machine that, kind of nebulizes the special liquid
Right.
that they've got. It's a saline solution, and you just breathe it in, and it is amazing. The vocal mist is wonderful.
I've got my Ganguzza VO
Ah,
Peeps
yeah.
throat spray that she hooked me up with at VO Atlanta, which
Yeah, that
is
stuff's great
absolutely
too.
disgusting, but it works really good.
Sorry, Anne. It
Yeah.
doesn't taste great, but it works well. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I posted the funniest video on Instagram afterwards of me hitting
Like,
myself with the
"Whoa."
throat spray, and it's like, but I tell everybody like, look, it
It
works.
works.
It's worth the
Mhm.
pain. It works. So
Yeah, and that's why I like the vocal mist. I mean, it comes with a you can get a little travel kit that goes with it, and it's got, like,
yep,
a little face mask or just the, little you could just, put it in your mouth and just kinda breathe, and it really helps hydrate your own. It's made for singers and, people who use, their voice a lot, public speaking, whatever, but it's great for the voiceover world. Actually, my vocal therapist, I had laryngitis 2 years ago at Christmas, and that's what she recommended I get, and boy, it just changed things, and
yep,
especially if I'm feeling very dry, summer or even the dead of winter when the heat's on and all that stuff, I'm constantly using it
yep,
every morning. And also I do a lot of vocal warm-ups and stuff in the shower, that warm, moist heat in the shower. That
yeah,
really helps. It just kinda starts my day out the right way of breathing in that warm, moist air and doing a lot of my, vocal warm-ups in the shower. First of all, I gets 2 things done at once, it
yep.
saves me time.
Well, and I think it's particularly important to remember too, because we're not talking about 30-second commercials here, right? Like
No, we're
two
talking
nights
long
ago,
form narration.
yeah, 2 nights ago, I had that weird thing where I had two clients send me scripts at the same time. Both of them needed them back urgently. And so I
Right.
found myself plowing through 10,000 words. And
Yeah,
that's a slog to get through that. And if you're not
it
taking
is.
care of yourself ahead of time, by the time you get to word, 6,000, your voice is starting to go like this. And by 10,000, you don't
Yeah,
even recognize yourself. And so
yeah,
it's something
yeah.
that you
Because
definitely got to keep in mind.
you do because, the first when you're editing, you can hear the beginning of the script
Yep.
to the end, and you're like, "Whoa, I changed a lot, and I
Makes it
shouldn't
really hard
have."
to do revisions later.
It is, it's like, "Let me listen to all those files because, okay, file
Yep.
this and file that, I sounded a little different," and sometimes I can even tell, "Okay, I did that one in the morning. Okay,
Yep.
that was an afternoon session."
Yep.
You could just tell. Your
Yep.
voice changes as you warm up and as you go through the day.
For
That's
sure.
why continuing to do your warm-ups throughout the day is very important
Really
too.
important. Yep.
After if you take a break at lunch, then warm up afterwards again.
Yep.
So, very important.
All right. We'll get
Yeah,
to
so
a couple
hopefully
more
that.
questions here in a minute, but I do want to
Yeah.
remind you next week coming up on Free Advice Friday, Cliff Zellman is going to be on the show. We were supposed to do one, I think it was in February, and we ended up having to reschedule, but he is back. So April 21st, next Friday, 1 o'clock, and we're going to be talking automotive. So again,
Woohoo.
subscribe to the channel. Make sure you get notified so that you won't miss that one. Cliff, definitely the king of automotive. So lots to learn in that session. All right, here's a great question from Shannon. Do you decide how to cut up the files? Or do you look to your client to tell you, I haven't had to deal with it yet? This is a big
Ah,
deal in e-learning. So this is
yeah.
a really good question.
Yeah, great question. So normally, an e-learning script looks very different than any other kind of script you'll get, like, for like a corporate narration or a,
Mhm.
explainer video or even a, commercial. Typically, there are 2 or more columns, in an e-learning script, one of which will say file name. Or if it's in a Word document, it will maybe have something at the top that, scene 2, scene 3, scene 4, whatever. And you have to either, if, it's not specified, file name, and then it says, some weird configuration of letters and numbers or whatever, then you ask the client or say to them, I've noticed, I will go back to the client and say, is it okay if I name the files X, if it just says scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, and I look at the name of the project, maybe it's about, PPE, let's call it, personal protective equipment. I'll
Yep.
say PPE underscore S for scene or slide, and then the slide number. And I just use that throughout the rest of the spot. And if it's module 1, maybe it's a script that's got everything combined. Maybe it's a 26-page script, but there's 3 modules included in that. So it'd be, PPE underscore M1 for module 1, underscore S. And then, so I would say to the client, is it okay if I label the files this way unless you have another
Yep.
designation you would like me to use? And if they don't say anything, they're like, yeah, that's fine. Then I try to make it whatever the project name is, what,
Yep.
either module or topic. Along with the slide name. Sometimes it may be 2A, 2B, 2C. Then you get to 3, and then maybe it skips 4 and 5, and it goes to 6. So you have to kind of follow along with that. But most of the time, your client provides that for you because they have a very specific naming convention they need because it's then going to, you know, correlate with their files on the
Yep.
other end that when they insert your audio into their project. And I always cut and paste. I never type it myself because I never want to have the
I will
chance of
screw it up.
screwing up
Yep.
because I've done that
Yep.
once
I
and
will
it
screw
was
it up.
really painful. So I always, copy and paste all the
Yep.
time. I never, hand type it unless I'm creating it myself, like I said, and then I still copy and paste. Once I've typed it once, it's copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. And depending on what program you're using, I use Twisted Wave, and that's a very easy program to drop your markers in and label the markers. There's so many easy ways to label the
Yep.
markers and then split the file. I think Adobe Audition uses that as well. Has a format of that. So yeah, using a program if you are going to get into e-learning, finding a program that has an easily usable file splitting, function is
Yep.
highly recommended.
I've always just done in Adobe Audition, I just record in multi-track mode, but then I just start stop. And so
Yeah,
then the files are already they're already
yeah,
split. But it's
split.
a
Yeah,
really
there's
great
that too.
question because generally
Yeah.
speaking, the client is going to give you
Mhm.
instructions for that. But if they
Yes.
don't, ask because
Yeah,
it's
always
almost
ask.
inevitable that if they don't tell you, whichever one you do, they'll end up wanting the opposite and you'll have to go back
Yeah.
and change it. So it's really important. But yeah, the naming structure and the file
Mhm.
splitting is a big deal. So that's a
It
really
is.
great question to ask, Shannon. It's
Yeah.
and a good question to bring up to your clients when you get the opportunity to do it.
Yeah,
Finally, get that e-learning
absolutely.
job.
And, a lot of people will be able to help you. I mean, there are a lot of tutorials online.
Yep.
I know Anthony Gettig had some, great, how to split files
Yep.
on, YouTube. I mean, a YouTube video for that. And I know several people have. So there are out there, it is out there. So whatever, program you're using, look it up and see if it talks about file splitting,
Yep.
and if not, find a Facebook group or whatever for that particular DAW and, ask the
Yep.
question and somebody's going to have that answer.
Yep.
So hopefully that'll help you.
For sure. All right.
Yeah.
Here's one from David for both
All
Mark
right.
and Christy. Do you reduce breaths one at a time, or can you recommend a favorite breath remover reducer plugin? What do you do?
On Twisted Wave, I do it all at once. There is a way to detect silences, and then, you kind of go through and sometimes it'll cut off things, and there's a way to move that little black bar that shows up when when all those silences are selected. Um, and then, I kind of can move it around. And so once I hit de-amplify, in this case, it's the amplify key, but if you put a minus in front of it, you're de-amplifying it.
Yep.
So I de-amplified a -15, and it just takes all those huge breaths and just squashes it
Yeah,
down.
right down.
I only remove the breath or any noise at the beginning of a file. Or at the very end, and I make it, completely silent. But everything else is de-amplified,
Yep.
because you're never supposed to remove all your breaths. I mean, we're human. We speak, we breathe, everything else. You don't want big, huge breaths in there. So yeah, de-amplifying them is the best. And you have to find out what de-amplification amount works for you and your space and your recording space. If you happen to have a really good quiet space and very low, noise floor, maybe -10 is all you need. Maybe you need -20,
Yep.
who knows? It depends on how you breathe, how your recording levels are and your space. So you have to play around with it and figure out, and, contact someone like Uncle Roy and say, hey, here's my file. Can you evaluate it for me? I de-amplified it. Are they still too loud? Are you still getting too much noise? But yeah, I de-amplify to about -15 because that just is what works for me in my space. And I do it kind of all at once. I did a tutorial and it's on YouTube talking about how to do that. I need to update it because since then I found a few more tricks. But yeah, doing it all at once for me is easier. So
I've played
it's a
around with the
process.
debreather and isotope. Now, mind you, I was using
Yeah,
RX7 before, and I always
right.
found that it cut off too much, and so I stopped
Yeah, me
using
too.
it. I don't know
Yeah.
if 10 has improved at all or not. That might be I may have to call Uncle Roy, get my VO
Yeah.
tech support and be like, hey, can we try this again and see if 10 works any better? All right, you're
Yeah.
not alone in this. I brush my teeth when I get clicks. I hadn't thought about the type of toothpaste. See, there you go. I would have never honestly thought about brushing my teeth to make the clicks go away, but hey, look, you learn
Sometimes
something
it
new
makes
every
it
day.
worse.
So
Sometimes it makes it worse right afterwards. I'm like, "Oh, I'm so clicky. Okay." And then, just it takes a few minutes for that, the toothpaste saliva, concentration to settle in, and then it's like, "Okay, now I'm better." Maybe a little
the spray
mouthwash.
tastes like dog hair, but it works.
Dog
Oh my
hair.
gosh.
I love it. Poor
It
Anne.
is
She's gonna be like, "What?"
it is very potent stuff, but I will buy it every time I see Anne because it just works. I don't know.
Yeah.
What can I tell you?
But Granny Smith apples are great too, so, and then you get, the apple a day keeps the doctor away thing, hopefully, so, there's
Sean's
that.
asking about the real count link. Do you
Yeah.
was it just like realcount.com?
Oh, let me see what it is. Hang on just one moment.
Nope.
Da-da-da-da-da.
Realcount.com is about something to do with taxes, so it's definitely not that one.
Okay. Oh my. This is
Let's
a
look it
very
up.
strange, long. Let me see if I can. I don't know. I don't have access to your
Real
comments at
count.
the moment, so I can send it to you by
There's a
email,
chat,
and then
there's an interview chat that you can send it to me, or we have a private chat if you see that window and you can send it there and
I
then I can
don't.
paste it. I can
I
paste
don't
it up
see
or
it
email it to
anywhere.
me or whatever. We'll get it and
Yeah,
we'll
we'll
share
get
it.
it to you guys. Yeah, we'll
We'll get
share
it
it.
and
I
we'll
can
share it.
afterwards, I can go back in and put it in there,
Okay.
but it's like ratingstone.agmsmith.ca, so and then it's this
Oh, one of
long
those
series of
very
whatever, blah, blah, blah,
random.
blah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very random things, but yeah, it's, oh, actually, this is from Dane Scott. Yeah, Dane Scott and Alexander Smith, so real count, so yeah, it's pretty cool.
All right.
It's really neat.
We'll
Yeah.
figure that out. So
Yeah.
again, if you've got a question that you would like to ask Christi, we're talking all about e-learning and that side of voiceover. So feel free, if you've got a question, type it into the
Yeah.
comments. Just put a Q beside your comment so that it pops out on my screen. I don't think I've missed anything. If I have missed your question, maybe just post it again, and I'll try to keep an eye out for it. But lots of good information being shared here already.
Oh, good. Good,
Yes,
good,
and
good.
I'm always learning something. I gotta
There's always new
start
things to
brushing my
learn.
teeth before I do e-learning now. Let's talk about, actually we're joking about if, the longer that you go on into a session, the harder that it becomes to match those revisions because your
Mhm.
voice
Yeah,
changes over time. But let's talk
yeah.
about revisions and the importance of hanging on to your files.
Oh gosh, I have done revisions for people 6 years after the fact.
Yep.
So, yeah, you have to keep all of it. I mean, keep everything you've ever done. I mean, external hard drives, I've got 4 or 5 of them in a basket above my desk, that is just like, "Oh, I should probably go back and find that." I mean, it's just, if they come to me and I keep everything, every script, every file, because you never ever know what you're going to need when, because,
Hmm.
something could pop up. I mean, it's also very important to get to know your voice as far as, okay, like I said before, sometimes I can listen to something and go, "Oh, I did that in the morning. Yep, that's an afternoon session." And, sometimes if I know they can't wait, I do my best to try to, change to work on my voice to make it sound like it's going to match. And, I work on it a lot sometimes. It takes several takes to get through and make it really sound like the file that I'm trying to revise, but I listen to it over and over again. I kinda close my eyes and I listen to it over and over, and sometimes I'll have, my recording going in the background, and I'm listening to the take, and I'll kind of say it along with it and then do it, once my take ends, and, just to kinda make sure it's going to blend as much as possible,
Yep.
because sometimes and a lot of times I try to do the least amount of as possible. Just that one word or two, if it's just a
Yep.
word or a
Yep.
phrase, to so that way it sounds as seamless as possible. So I try not to make it, you know, change the whole thing unless it would be more advantageous to change the whole thing. But yeah, I try to do as surgical strike as much as possible. Sometimes it's too noticeable. It's like, okay, well, I need that whole phrase, or that's a short, it's like 2 lines,
Yep.
let me do the whole thing. Maybe it would sound better if it was the whole thing. So,
I
you kind
actually
of that's something you come up with as you do this more often.
you do it.
You get
Yep.
used to it.
I actually
Yeah.
held on to an old microphone for a couple of years
Me
just in
too.
case I had gotten asked to go back, and I did. And so
Mhm.
then I was even able to switch back to an old microphone to try to make match sounds again, right? But
Yeah,
I
I've
don't
done
know
that
if you
too.
you run into this. Like I've run into, if you do the employee benefit stuff,
Oh,
your
yes.
employee benefits package, and
For
sometimes you got to redo the whole entire thing, but sometimes they literally just want you to re-record the year because
Yeah.
nothing has changed. And
Yeah.
so then you got to go back, and if you have all of the original files, if you've held on to everything, if you remembered all your settings and all of that, you can just go back and record the year or whatever. It certainly makes
Yeah, and
life
drop it
a little
in.
bit easier to be able to do that. If we switch over here, this is the real count. Is this the one? Is
Oh,
this the
good.
site? The Voiceover Professionals word counter?
Yes.
That's okay.
It's
So there we
green at the
go.
top. I think I can't see anything. All I can see is you, Mark, so
Oh,
I'm
you
not
can't
sure.
see. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's all right. So this is, let me put this link in here. I think this is what we're looking at. So real count, earn what you deserve. The Voiceover Professionals word counter. So if you land on the
Yes.
page that looks like that, I just threw the link into
Yeah.
the comments there. If you land on the page that looks like that, then we know that you're on the right page and you're
Yep.
seeing the right thing. So,
Yeah.
all right,
It's
let's
a neat
see.
and handy little tool,
I, I know a couple other questions have popped up in
Oh,
the
good.
chat here. Let's see. Okay, there's a question about pricing per word per finished minute. So,
Mhm.
Chaz, we did actually talk about that earlier in the broadcast. If you want to go back and catch the replay for that early after we're done here, we go into length about
Mhm.
pricing out for e-learning. Here's one from John. Do you send clients processed or raw audio?
I don't do a lot of processing.
Hmm.
I diminish my breaths, and sometimes I'll deal with a sibilance thing if it happens to be particularly bad on a day.
Yep.
But yeah, it's pretty much, I have really very low noise floor, so I don't do a lot to my files. I do very little.
Which is how
You
it
know,
should be, ideally,
yeah,
right?
yeah, I mean, I don't have to do a lot to it. Now, in some cases I do or will, but so it's that's for me a hard question because it's kind of raw, but kind of processed. I do send processed as far as I diminish my breaths. I make sure that, at the beginning of every file there's no breath or noise, to it. So there is some processing there, I guess you could say. That's more editing than
I
processing.
think that's part of it
Um,
is that term, right? Is it,
yeah,
processing versus editing versus mastering, and what are we
yeah,
specifically talking about? And I think,
yeah.
removing the mistakes, deep breath,
Mhm.
de-click, very minimal, but
Yes.
I'm not
Yeah.
EQing and running compressions and all of that sort of
No.
stuff. So I mean, in that
None of that.
case, I'm, basically sending raw audio is kind of what it comes
Yeah,
down to. But
yeah,
but
me too.
that's where I mean, for me, I've worked with Uncle Roy. He's listened to my stuff. He's given me a couple of buttons to push for Adobe, and he says, just do that and send it. And so I just do
Yeah.
that and send it. And
That's kinda me too, yeah, and once you get your system set up to do that, that's what's gonna help, and then it is kind of, it's as raw as it can be, it's as far as it's unprocessed and as clean, we'll call
right.
it clean as it can be,
Okay.
whatever it takes you to do to get to a nice clean file, and, most of the time, your clients are asking you to clean everything up. They want drag and drop ready to go.
Yep.
So that's the other part of that question you're probably trying to ask. Unless it is a client who does all the editing for you, which doesn't happen very often,
I was going to say
unless you're
very
working, if
rare.
you're on a roster,
Yep.
and they have their own people doing stuff for you, and it's like, yeah, just send us the stuff. But if it happens to be, you're interfacing with the actual client, end client themselves, they want the finished, ready to go files because they're going to drop it into their program. The other thing to keep in mind when it comes to finished files, if they ask for an MP3, if you can, send them like a 192
Yep.
kbps, whatever, at the least, at the
Hold on to the
absolute
wave
least.
files too.
Oh, yeah. Record
Right.
everything and save it as a wave.
Save it
Never
as a
save it as an
wave and then
MP3.
export a secondary file
Yeah.
as an MP3 so that if they change their
Yes.
mind, you
Mhm.
haven't degraded the
Degraded
quality
it.
of your original audio, right? I
Yeah.
think
Because
a point that you
yeah.
made that's really, really important to remember, the drag and drop thing, by the way, that,
Mhm.
we were talking about what do I put in my marketing email? There's something right there that you could mention putting in your marketing email because
Absolutely.
a lot of these e-learning places, they're not production companies. They're not
Mm-mm.
recording engineers. So they want it to be as easy as possible. Give them good, clean audio that they
Yep.
can just stick right into Articulate or whatever it is that they're using to create their e-learning course. You're the hero, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They want it ready to go because see what's going to happen is once they put it into, Articulate or Storyline or whatever they're using, then after that, it might get squashed a little bit in that
Yep.
process.
Yep.
So if you deliver a 192, MP3 at the lowest, by the time they put it in, it's going to degrade a little bit. And then they're going to upload it to an LMS or a learning management system, which is
Yep.
what hosts it for their employees to view. It may squash
Squash
again.
again. Yep.
And then they're going to listen to it on headphones most of the time
Yep.
because they're sitting at their desk or whatever. They have to put their headphones on so they're not disturbing the whole office. Or, a lot of times like sales stuff. I did a whole bunch of medical sales stuff for a while. And, between sales calls, they stop at Starbucks, grab lunch somewhere, whatever, and they do a little training, or they're sitting in their car and they're listening on headphones or whatever. So, you have to remember that sometimes they're listening to these things on earbuds. And so you want to make it sound as good as possible without it being too squashed. So, if unless they insist on having it as a 128 MP3 file, deliver a little bit higher quality is probably going to be better for you in the long run because it is going to go through that compression process multiple
Absolutely.
times.
Absolutely.
So,
That's a
yeah,
good tip because we want to make sure that we're making it as easy as possible. We also want to reduce the amount of work that we have to do, right? I don't want to have to go back and
yeah.
forth and send multiple files and all of that sort of
Ugh,
stuff. Well, we've got a couple
exactly.
other questions in the chat
Oh,
we're going to
good.
get to in a minute, but I want to bring
Mhm.
up. I know you said, Christy, you can't see this, but I'm going to load up here the website for the Tennessee Voiceover Studios.
Oh, thank you.
Free plug, free plug. Tell us
Oh,
a little
thank you.
bit about the Tennessee Voiceover Studios. It's tnvoiceoverstudios.com for those of you that are interested and want to check it out. But talk
Yeah.
about this because this is a pretty cool thing that you've done.
Well, thank you. It's actually a physical location here in downtown Nashville. So we're right outside downtown Nashville. So for people who come into town, we offer studio rental. I've had people that have been visiting from overseas and needed something. There's a lady who's basically the voice of what's like our target here in Denmark, and she had a whole bunch of sessions she needed to do with her studio over there. And so I've had people fellow voice actors visiting town who have come in and used the studio. It's got Source Connect, the whole 9 yards. But we also teach a lot of classes, both virtual and in person, and sometimes hybrid. I've got some students in the room and others
Yep.
on Zoom with me, and we teach a lot of different things. We've got weekly workout sessions. I've got pro workout sessions for working pros. A lot of voiceover 101 and beginning acting. We've got classes with Kevin Kilpatrick for middle class VO, and he goes into details about e-learning and explainer videos, local commercials, phone systems, that kind of stuff. We just have a variety of classes that we offer. I do have e-learning workouts. I'm getting ready to do those again in August. There'll be, 5 in a row, and they're specifically, related to e-learning, for the weekly workout session for that, and, just different classes and things we offer, and people come into town. I've got, a few things lined up and a few that I'm still waiting to confirm for people to be coming into town for weekend workshops and stuff. So, yeah, it's
Right
just
on.
it's a lovely work in progress.
Just
Labor of
scrolling
love.
through all of the different classes. I see Jade Rodney Turner's Introduction to
Yeah.
Audiobooks. I have
Yes.
zero desire to do audiobooks, but I would sign up for that class just to listen to Jay Rodney talk for a
I
weekend.
know. I know. He's fantastic. He's so great, and it's a wonderful class. He just likes to sit there and tell you, "Okay, here's all the stuff I did to screw up, don't do that, and here's how to fix it, and here's how to do it right," and I love it. I just
Yep.
love that humbleness and willing to share that he has. He's terrific, so,
So the
yeah, we've
website's on
had a
the
lot of
screen
good
there,
classes.
tnvoiceoverstudios.com if you want to check
Yeah.
that out and see some of the different offerings, or if you happen to be in the Nashville area.
Yeah,
Certainly
absolutely.
certainly something that you might want to look into. So, all right,
Yeah.
there we go. That's that. Let's
Thank you.
little plug there for you. All right, here's a question from Kelsey. We had to know this
Mhm.
one was coming. Where do you find the work? Where are we going to find these e-learning
Oh
opportunities?
boy, yeah, there's a lot of places. LinkedIn is obviously is the big
Yeah.
juggernaut for this, and Twitter, honestly, is where a lot of instructional designers are, and instructional designers are the people who you will probably be interfacing with the most,
Mhm.
because they're the people who are creating the training. Um, Sometimes HR people are tasked with that if, the company's not big enough to have an instructional designer either on staff or hire freelance. But a lot of times, honestly, I like to reverse engineer job postings, which is kind of a strange way to do it, but it works. I've gotten several good long-term clients this way. If you go to any job posting site, Indeed or Monster or Flex Jobs or whatever, you can look up people looking for e-learning designers. And if you put in the keywords voiceover, a lot of times what will come up is an e-learning job, and it will talk about how they have to hire the voice actor or even do it themselves.
Yep.
So at that point, that's the opportunity to find that company, find out who they report to. The other thing in the
Yep.
job posting to look for is
Yep.
who they report to, because that person is probably not leaving and that vacancy is not open. So you would find them on LinkedIn and then find out, how to contact them either through LinkedIn or through email. Reach out to them and say, "Hey, I know that you're, looking for instructional designers at your company. I happen to be a voice actor and I know you use voiceover for your projects. I'd love to, be considered and added to your roster." And sometimes that's worked really, really well for me.
Yeah.
Not
That's a
always,
genius
but
tip.
yeah, it really that's a great one. And also, never underestimate the power of any kind of alumni associations you might
Yeah,
belong to. Not
for sure.
necessarily, a lot of people go to college and stuff. Okay, great, or technical colleges, but alumni associations for companies you've worked for. Consider it your alumni group, whatever.
Yep.
Or if you're following along on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, whoever the company that you maybe either work for now or have worked for in the past, and you happen to know your previous uh, work colleagues, reach out to them and let them know what you're doing. Maybe
Mhm.
it's, the company's changed a little bit as far as, maybe the people who are in it, because maybe it's been a few years since you've worked there. Reach out to, whoever you do still have contact with there and say, "Hey, is so and so still in the HR department, or who's doing your training now, or how are you guys doing your training? I know it was all live before, but, since COVID, have things changed? Do you
Yep.
think might need voice actors?" So consider your alumni-ness, and even, universities are great places. If you happen to go to a larger university or even smaller university, getting connected with your alumni association, because there are people who own companies, and you can reach out as a fellow, alumni and say,
Yep.
"Hey, we have this affinity already, something in common.
Yep.
And how can I help you with your business and you can help me with mine?" And that's a really big, powerful draw. And it's something that a lot of people don't think of, and it's gonna set you apart because, yeah, I mean, if you go to a bigger school, I'm sure there are multiple people who went there, but how many of them are actually reaching out for work?
Yeah.
And it may not doesn't necessarily always have to be about e-learning either. Maybe they'll hire
Sure.
you for their telephone system, and then all of a sudden they're
Commercial
like, "Oh,
social
I've got
media
some training."
videos, everything, right?
Everything, yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's a great work tip, but yeah,
Yep.
when it comes to those things, those are some of the big things that I've done that have really worked well for me that are a little different than just constantly contacting people on LinkedIn and Twitter. I mean, I still use that as another way to find the information for people, but it's a kind of a hand in hand thing. I try to reach out to people with a specific, you know, affinity for other things. If you happen to be in a particular area, whatever. Another great one is your chamber of commerce, your
Yep,
local chamber of commerce.
for
It's a
sure.
great place to meet local business people. And again, it might lead to a small other kind of job first, but eventually e-learning as well. So
If
definitely
you
something to think about.
if you had told me a year ago that Twitter was a hotspot for e-learning, I probably would have laughed at you. And
Yeah.
then, but now in the last, I would say probably the last 6 months, I bet you at least 3 or 4 days a week, I will go on to Twitter and I will see e-learning as one of the top trending hashtags in my feed.
Yeah.
And I don't ever remember seeing it like that before. I mean, I've been on Twitter forever, and it sort of has become a really popular place for instructional designers to hang out. I mean,
Yeah.
LinkedIn all day long. I'm
Yeah,
connected
of
with a
course.
million of them on LinkedIn, but Twitter would not have been my right. Video games,
Yeah.
character animation. Yeah, go to Twitter.
Mhm.
Absolutely. E-learning I would have
Yeah.
never thought of, but I see it trending all the time now. And so I
They
am
share
spending more
information
time
with each
there.
other there. Yeah,
Yep.
that's where they share information. I mean, the thing about, instructional designers and people that are in the learning space, learning designers and such, they like to learn. They
Yeah.
like to share information about the latest learning stuff.
They're
And
no
so they're
different than voice actors. What do we
I
do?
know.
We all connect with each other and network with
Yeah,
each other and share with each other and
exactly.
right? So,
Yeah, here's the latest new, gadget or whatever.
yep,
Or, oh, did you happen to see this thing about blah, blah, blah? We all like to do that, and so do they. And they like to share the latest learning information, and, latest, adult learning theory or,
yep,
hey, gamification and this style of gamification and blah, 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 blah. So they follow each other a lot and they share information. And so if you ever happen to see something and you are maybe already have one or two people on your list, maybe it's a, hey, not sure if you saw this, post on Twitter, by so
yep,
and so. I thought this was really fascinating. Is this something
yep,
you're working on too? And then they may come back to you like, yeah, I'm really good friends with so and so, and I read that article. It was really great. And then at least you're not assuming that they haven't seen it. You're like, I'm not sure if you saw it, is a great way to put it.
yep,
But then it's like, showing them that you are in touch in their community
yep.
and you're paying attention. So
Well, and you're
yeah,
looking to
it's
add
just really
value,
good.
right? You're not just begging for
Yeah,
voiceover work. You're
yeah,
looking to help them
yeah,
out and add value to them in some way.
yeah, yeah. Because if
Well,
they haven't seen that article, then they've got something new they can look at.
I
So
want to put this up on the screen here for those of you that are interested in getting in touch with Christy. If you're interested in talking to her a little bit more about any of this stuff, I mean, obviously you can check out the Tennessee Voiceover Studios, but there's Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. She's everywhere. And she's one of the ones who's been fortunate enough to get the same username at all of the platforms. I wasn't able to
yes.
land the same
Oh
username at a couple of
no.
them. So that makes it so much easier. It's just
Yep.
at Christi Bowen VO at everything. And
Yeah.
websites there as well, christybowen.com. So uh, get connected. Lots to learn from Christy. Cheer
Yeah,
on the
happy to.
Predators with her as well.
Yes, yes. Our last game of the season tonight. So,
She's representing. She's got her shirt on.
and my
Diehard
mug.
hockey
Yeah.
fan. Look at that. Got the mug and everything.
Yep, season ticket holder, diehard fan.
There you go.
I
Well,
feel the same way
Christy,
as you do about your Red Sox, so,
oh, Red Sox aren't giving me anything to cheer about this year. I don't know if I
I
don't really
mean,
feel
you
like a
still love
diehard
them.
fan this year. I feel more like a disgruntled, abandoned fan.
But you're still a fan, so
I
that's what
am still a
counts.
fan. I will still try to go to Fenway this year and watch a game and eat my lobster roll. So
There you go.
well, Christy, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank
So much
you.
good information shared here. And for those of you that maybe jumped in a little bit late, I will go back and get some chapter markers added that'll link you to the specific questions that were asked and answered. So you'll be able to go back and watch this replay afterwards. And of course, reach out to Christy on social media or sign up for
Absolutely.
one of these classes. I know there's some virtual classes at the Tennessee Voiceover Studios. Or hey, look,
Yeah.
Nashville's got great desserts. And so, if you just want to go to Nashville for a weekend, attend a class, eat some great Southern desserts, hang out,
Oh, yeah.
listen to some bands or whatever. Maybe a road trip is in order. You can treat it like a long weekend vacation, but because you're going for a class, you
Absolutely.
could write it off as a business expense. And
Yeah, no
I am not
kidding.
an accountant, and this is not financial advice, but just saying, I
Little
heard that you
disclaimer.
might be able to do something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, come on over to Nashville. We would love to have you.
Right on. So again, just a quick reminder for those of you that are looking for some more free advice Friday opportunities. Cliff Zellman is coming up next week. That's going to be April the 21st, live at 1 o'clock right here on the channel. That's 1 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to be talking all about automotive. So that is going to be one that you're going to want to check out. And then the
Mhm.
following week, I have got Brad Highland coming on, or no, not Brad Highland, Brad Newman. Already had Brad Highland on. Brad Newman is going to be coming on. And that is going to be, we're going to be talking websites and domains and keeping your emails out of spam and all of that kind of technical website-y type stuff that I don't have the brain capacity to answer all of your questions for. So
But
that's
he's
going to be,
brilliant, so join him.
he is brilliant. And that's going to be April 28th at 1:00 Eastern. So Christi, any parting thoughts, any parting wisdom that you would love to share? What's the one piece of advice that nobody asked the question for, but you're gonna give it to us anyway, because it's like, this is the insight that is gonna
Oh, boy.
change your e-learning life. No
Oh,
pressure.
gosh. Yeah, no pressure. Oh, gosh, I don't even know. Oh, geez, no pressure there. Um, words of wisdom. I was gonna say word count kinda thing. That's always my little secret, weapon there, but, I think, being conversational and
Yeah,
being versatile in e-learning is now just as important. It's,
totally sucks. It was
yeah,
the one place where I
yeah,
was still safe because they
yep,
didn't ask for that in every script, but
yep,
now they are, right?
now they
Conversational,
are.
authentic, genuine.
Yeah.
Starting to see a lot more role-playing type
Role
stuff
playing,
too. Yep,
yes, and, don't be afraid to be a little bit of a character every now and then because most of the time it's very short. You won't have
yeah,
to be a character for long, but, you know, the C I like to say the C word of, e-learning is conversational now. It's actually comfort, making
yep.
people feel comfortable. That's the big thing, and that means being a little more authentic, and a little less narratory, and, a little more authentically you and comfortable with what you're talking about. And if you have no clue what a knife blade fuse block is, fake it.
Fake it. Yeah. This
Did a
is also
whole
an
module
area
on that.
though where,
But,
we talk about adding value to our clients. This is something, maybe you've seen this too. I'm helping clients more and more with casting for little bit roles
yes,
because
absolutely.
there's role playing and scenario type stuff and there's different characters that are going in. And so if you can go to your client and say, by the way, I noticed that there were several roles here. If you need help casting those,
Mhm.
let me know. Right. Again, you get to be the
Yeah,
hero. You get to provide that value.
absolutely.
But that is definitely a trend that is starting to become more and more of a thing
Yep,
in e-learning for sure.
it is, and I've had several clients reach out to me and say, "Hey, they're going with a guy for this one, but we came to you first because we know, you're so good at this and you probably know some people."
Yep.
The fact that they thought of me first, even though
Yep.
I'm not getting that job, is what you always want. That's how you
Absolutely.
strive to be the person in their mind.
100%. All right,
Yep.
Christi. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you
your
for
time. I,
having
I
me.
certainly appreciate it, and I know that a lot of good advice has been given. So this has been great. We'll have to do it again sometime. We'll see if you end up
Absolutely.
you're one of the top 5 most listened to podcasts. We'll see if we can get you the
Okay.
top 5 most watched and streamed Free Advice Fridays, because
Perfect.
it's good information that people need to have. So thank you so much, guys.
You're welcome. Thank
I
you.
I appreciate you coming, hanging out, asking questions as always. So thank you so much for that. Again, join me next Friday with Cliff Zellman. Whatever you decide to do this weekend, have fun, stay safe, and as always, Uncle Roy, say it with me: go find some leads.